This is East Asia Tonight.
Good Friday evening, I'm Shahida Othman. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Dialing down the trade tensions, China's Vice Commerce Minister optimistic that Beijing and Washington can maintain stable trade relations that will benefit everyone. But frictions remain in the South China Sea, with the U.S. backing the Philippines with a special task force in the disputed waters. Deadlock in Baku as countries race to seal a climate deal on the final day of COP29 talks. China, the world's largest emitter, urging all parties to meet one another halfway. Japan's minority government signs off on a $140 billion stimulus that includes handing out money to low-income households, subsidies and assistance to small businesses. And we hear from Trip.com's CEO James Sun, who explains to us the 3 E's that shape the travel trends of today. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, we'll take you through the journey of one of China's top biotech hubs, the brainchild of 30 years of partnership between Singapore and Beijing. And the landscape of art collecting in South Korea evolves, with millennials and Gen Z taking a greater interest. China says it is willing to talk to the U.S. to enhance bilateral trade and that the sides can maintain a stable development trend in economic relations. The comments by China's Vice Commerce Minister follow a threat by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to impose tariffs of over 60% on all Chinese goods. Developments in Washington have rattled Chinese manufacturers, with exporters bracing for any trade disruptions. Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen is also China's international trade representative. He told reporters U.S. and China can reach a win-win scenario.
我们认为，中国和美国如果能够在经贸关系方面保持一个稳定的、健康的、可持续的这种发展态势，既有利于中国人民、美国人民，也有利于世界各国人民。
And over in the U.S., the Wall Street Journal is reporting that President-elect Donald Trump is mulling financier Kevin Warsh to become his Treasury Secretary and possibly take over later as head of the Federal Reserve when Jerome Powell's term ends in 2026. Warsh argued back in 2018 that if the U.S. wanted to decrease its trade deficit with China, Washington could push Beijing to reduce restrictions that prevent Americans from providing services to the Chinese market. But he told Politico recently that he wouldn't prioritize the trade deficit as the framework that is used to determine the great power ties between Beijing and Washington. And we have CNA's Olivia S joining us now for more. Olivia, uncertainties abound. Have we heard more from China about their preparations?
Sean, this is one of the first times we're hearing a direct response from a senior Chinese official on this matter. The Vice Commerce Minister saying that China is willing to work with the U.S. to manage their differences in order to promote steady trade relations, but also warning that tariffs imposed on imports will not solve the trade deficit and, in fact, may backfire and cause consumers to pay more for their goods. But overall, we're not hearing specifics on what China is planning to do. But this rather conciliatory tone, trying to fend off any measures that may impact China's economy, has been consistent with China's approach that we've seen since Mr. Trump's win a few weeks ago, including in the congratulatory messages by Chinese President Xi Jinping in his meeting also with outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden, in which he did say that China was willing to work with the U.S. to build bilateral relations. But overall, with regard to tariffs, China has kept its cards relatively close to its chest. When the foreign ministry had been asked about this previously, it said that it would not answer hypothetical questions. Analysts have also pointed out that China perhaps is waiting to see what exactly the incoming Trump administration will do. We have to remember what Mr. Trump said have been campaign trail promises. What will actually become policy is still unknown. Shaz.
Now, the U.S. announced that its military is supporting Philippine operations in the South China Sea via a special task force. An American embassy official says the initiative will enhance coordination and interoperability between the two allies and support Philippine armed forces activities in the waters. Manila said it involves assistance on intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. The U.S. has consistently expressed its intent to ensure peace and freedom of navigation in Asia's most contested waters. More than $3 trillion worth of trade passes through the South China Sea each year. Besides China and the Philippines, other countries with conflicting claims include Vietnam and Malaysia. Now, for more, we are now joined by Dr. Colin Co, Senior Fellow at the Institute of Defense and Strategy Studies at RSIS. Welcome, Dr. Co. Dr. Co, Manila has made it clear that this task force is purely a Philippine operation, but Washington is said to be providing support in terms of surveillance and intelligence. How critical is U.S. assistance on such data, and why does the Philippines need it now?
Thank you. The Philippine Armed Forces has been in the recent years trying to modernize its capabilities. And one of the weakest point of the Armed Forces of the Philippines has been in the area of ISR capabilities. So therefore, it is necessary for the AFP to tap on its US allies' capabilities in order to have better awareness of the situation in what they call the West Philippine Sea.
And how is the task force helping the Philippines deal with operational matters or military maritime activities? Do you see this as a motivation for Manila to take bolder actions against Beijing in the South China Sea?
Well, at least it is important to note that the ability to be able to keep track or detect and to make sense of the situation out there at sea, or rather, we tend to call that the pattern of life out there at sea, especially around Second Thomas Shore, which this task group is oriented towards primarily, will be instrumental in helping the AFP plan for the resupply mission. It's important because you need to know the Chinese vessels and other assets that are operating nearby, and thereby you could take necessary measures to avoid, say, for example, interdiction by Chinese vessels or unnecessary movements in the area as well.
In terms of the announcement, the timing of the announcement, Dr. Co, it was revealed on Mr. Austin's social media platform after his visit to a command center. There are uncertainties now when the task force was actually formed. Why do you think the U.S. and the Philippines chose to make this public now?
According to the latest reports in the Philippines, the task force was reportedly formed after the June 17 clash at Second Thomas Shore. This task force is definitely one arm of that. I also understand that the Marine Rotational Force in Darwin, for example, was also put on sort of standby in case there is a necessity for the US to intervene and to help out their Filipino allies. But the timing of the announcement was interesting because for sure there has been much trepidation, especially in the region, not least, of course, for Manila, regarding the U.S. Ability to commit to the Philippine defense in the event of a conflict with China, given what's happening right now in the Middle East and in Europe that consume quite a bit of the U.S. strategic attention. So I think in that way, Austin's visit is coinciding with the desire to also send a signal, not just to reassure Manila, but I believe also to send a signal to China that notwithstanding the conflicts elsewhere in the world, the U.S. remains committed to help the Philippines in the South China Sea.
And how do you think China is reading into all of this? What does such a move likely precede?
I don't think it will come across as surprising to China, honestly, because the Chinese have been well aware of the fact that in the recent years, especially ever since Marcos Jr. Came to office, there has been increased U.S. military presence in the Philippines and, of course, in the Palawan area, which is facing the South China Sea. And definitely in the context of the string of incidents that were observed in the West Philippine Sea between China and the Philippines in the recent times. So I don't think it will come across as surprising to China. And one thing is that besides the technical calculations of what this task force could do and could not do, I think Beijing is likely betting on the fact that Washington is not having any bandwidth to have any conflict in the South China Sea that would distract it in Europe or in the Middle East. Certainly right now, a third front of a conflict is not desirable on the part of Washington.
All right, Dr. Co, appreciate your insights. Thank you very much. Dr. Colin Co there from RSIS. Now, coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan's government approves a $140 billion stimulus package, including cash handouts and fuel subsidies. And Henry is here with business. Henry, the Japanese government is moving to spur the economy.
Well, indeed, Shah. And Japan's government has signed off on a $140 billion stimulus drive aimed at putting more money into consumers' pockets. The package includes handouts of around $190 for low-income households, fuel and energy subsidies and assistance to small businesses. While the amount will still need to be approved by Parliament at a later date, the overall impact of the package is projected to be worth $253 billion when including loans and private sector investment. The LDP lost its parliamentary majority in the election last month, with the cost of living one of the main voter concerns. In figures out this morning, inflation still riding above the central bank's 2% target level for October. The core measure that takes out the prices of fresh food and energy rose slightly to 2.3% on year. And the measure which excludes fresh food only eased marginally along with the overall inflation rate. But that's off a low base from last year's reduction in utility subsidies. While Japanese automaker Nissan set to signal a strategic shift in Southeast Asia, reports say it's set to cut or transfer roughly 1,000 jobs in Thailand as it shrinks production following declining sales in the region. And Reuters, citing sources familiar with the development, says Nissan plans to partially stop production at one of its 2 assembly plants in Thailand. It will consolidate the operations into its second assembly plant in the outskirts of Bangkok by September next year. This move comes hot on the heels of a global strategic reduction of 9,000 jobs after Nissan posted worse than expected half-year earnings. A spokesperson declined to comment on the report, but confirmed that no plant will close in Thailand. And shares of the automaker ending the session down about 1.5%, even as the broader Japanese markets gained ground. And that's all for business. Back to you, Shah.
Thanks very much, Henry. Now, China has announced that it is offering visa-free travel to a number of countries, including Japan, Bulgaria and Romania. The measure will kick in starting at the end of this month, when Japanese passport holders will be able to go travel to China without needing a visa for the first time in 4 years. China had suspended an earlier arrangement with Japan during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Beijing is also increasing visa-free stay from 15 to 30 days, and this applies to all 38 countries in the program. Beijing's visa announcement comes on the back of a China tourism boom. I spoke recently with Trip.com CEO Jane Sun, who says Chinese travelers are shaping the global market not just with their numbers, but also their wallets.
Chinese consumers have very strong buying power. I was with the executives for the airports, and they told me that Trip.com customers have 2 to 3 times buying power compared to the average buyers. So as long as we bring customers to these airports, to these shops, they really welcome customers from our sites. Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand offers free visa. The ministers from Thailand even went to the airport to welcome customers from Trip.com. So those nice gestures really warm people's hearts and welcome our customers into their country.
With China's latest adoption of numerous stimulus measures against a slow economic recovery and a shaky property market, how is that impacting the travel industry and Chinese consumer confidence?
Certain industries have some challenges. However, if the young peoples are not buying houses, they have more disposable income, particularly after COVID. If you survey consumers in these regions, everyone will tell you travel is #1 activities they want to do. The second one probably is wellness. The third one is events-driven activities. So travel is going to be a long, everlasting industry that attracts lots of consumers.
And we saw travel spending over the 7-day national holiday in early October on its own upward momentum with $99 billion in domestic tourism revenue. That's a year-on-year rise of 6.3%. What new trends do you expect to see in the coming year? Perhaps domestic trips more than outbound travel?
Yeah, we have seen the new trend, which we called 3 E's. The first E is entertainment plus travel. So within the country and also outbound, we saw young people really wants to have events-driven activities. For example, Olympic Games in Paris, Taylor Swift shows, different concerts, music festivals attracts lots of young people. So we team up with the events organization, just make sure we offer packages which gives events plus travel options to our young people. The second E is eco-friendly. Young people choose the product which give them the option to choose for green initiatives. For example, when they have to rent a car, we promote electronic vehicle. For hotel partners, we recommend them to install solar panel to save energy and reduce emission. So that kind of product is very welcomed by our customers. The third E is elderly friendly. In China, the retirement age is very low. For women, 50 to 55 years old, people can retire. For men, 55 to 60, they can retire. And this is the generation which made money during the China's opening policy. Now they have energy, they're healthy, they're eager to travel. So when we talk to the hotel partners, for example, near the mega cities, they very much like to offer good packages to elderly travelers.
But airfares are continuing to remain high due to fuel costs. Will that have any ripple effect on consumer behavior in the long term?
Both flight as well as the hotel price for outbound travelers still is very high compared to the domestic market. However, I think after COVID, people are prioritizing their desire for traveling around the world. So we still see a robust demand from consumers.
And coming up on East Asia tonight, the grueling 2-week COP29 conference is set to wrap up, but delegates are still awaiting a new proposal for a potential compromise in climate finance. Our correspondent with updates in just a moment. China says it is willing to talk to the U.S. to enhance bilateral trade and that the sides can maintain a stable development trend in economic relations. The U.S. says its military is supporting Philippine operations in the South China Sea via a special task force. Manila says the initiative includes intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And time is running out for negotiators at the COP29 climate summit to come up with a climate financing deal, but sticking points remain. Host Azerbaijan is urging all parties to quickly bridge their differences and come up with a climate finance deal. The 10-page document released yesterday left core details unresolved, including how much wealthy nations should contribute. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are supposed to agree on a new target to replace the previous $100 billion pledge. Developing nations argue that they need at least $1.3 trillion to cope with the effects of climate change. But major contributors such as the European Union have so far refuted, insisting that it is unrealistic not to count private investment. China joins the developing world in rejecting the draft, but has urged all parties to meet halfway on the issue. Apart from divisions over money, many nations also fear the climate deal does not reflect the urgency in tackling climate change. Last year, delegates at the COP28 summit in Dubai made a landmark call to phase out the use of fossil fuels, but stopped short of reaching an agreement on the language of the document. Now, for more, we're now joined by CNA's climate change correspondent Jag Board, live in Bangkok. Jag, it's good to see you. We're still waiting for a new draft text on the financing goal. What's the current progress like?
Well, the latest update is that there is no update. We've been waiting for a few hours now. The whole world has basically been waiting for the latest draft text, not the final text, the draft text from the COP presidency that is meant to settle multiple outstanding issues. Central to this is a single figure. How much money will rich nations and others give to developing nations? And I think all of this, delay is indicative of just how tough these negotiations have been so far, as well as that $1.3 trillion figure that we're looking at. I think it's really interesting to pay attention to how the world actually gets to something like that. It will involve hundreds of billions of dollars potentially from public funding from wealthy nations, something that so far they've appeared reluctant to put on the table. It will also have to include money from countries that traditionally don't want to be involved in being donor nations, like China, like Russia, like Saudi Arabia. Will they come to the table now? And then on top of that, multiple other sources, development banks, levies from things like carbon taxes, and then a huge chunk potentially from the private sector. So a lot still to be worked out on that front. I am hearing optimism from people in Baku suggesting that there is some convergence now on some of the most difficult issues, but no doubt that this summit is running into overtime. I don't expect any outcome really before tomorrow. So, we're all sitting here and waiting right now.
All right, and we also know that there has been a lot of buzz about China's pushback from contributing fully to the financing goal. What do we make of this decision?
A big talking point over the last 2 weeks, will China stump up some of its public funding to contribute to global climate financing? That's something that officials from China in Baku have consistently reiterated that they're not interested in doing. But if the world is to reach kind of this $1.3 trillion figure that's being passed around, China will have to form some part of that. And there is pressure on them to join this greater effort to mobilize financing. What China is doing, on the other hand, is really making a big deal out of trade barriers that are impacting a lot of its green technology that it's trying to export all around the world, and saying that countries and regions like the United States and Europe that are blocking or adding tariffs to a lot of Chinese products is actually harming climate change ambition and action. And if you want China to pay, you can't at the same time have these types of trade barriers that are impacting green progress all around the world. So we are seeing trade and climate become more and more enmeshed in these types of talks. And it's also adding ammunition to the argument that COP, as it is, isn't quite fit for purpose, and that we may need to rethink how these types of negotiations happen going forward from here.
All right, Jag, appreciate that. Thank you so much. CNA's Jag Board, they're reporting live from Bangkok. If you're into Korean pop, you may very well be aware of the ways designed to encourage the fan base to spend. One particular method is to include a special gift, such as in the form of a photo of a certain group member within each physical album. And that also means if you want to collect them all, you have to buy quite a number of the same album and possibly end up with duplicate photos. But this process generates a significant amount of plastic waste. K-pop fans who are concerned about the environmental impact have come together to urge South Korean entertainment companies to look into ending plastic use.
네, 요즘 누가 CD를 듣나요? 대부분이 스트리밍으로 음악을 듣는 지금 시점에 대부분 CD 플레이어도 없고요. 근데 이게 CD가 한 장씩 포함된 앨범을 엔터사의 마케팅 상수로 인해서 과대 생산하고 또 과대 폐기되는 이 문제가 계속 반복이 되고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 굉장히 심각하고 사실 CD에도 그리고 여기 앨범 포장지에도 또 앨범뿐만 아니라 이런 포장된 코팅제에도 전부 플라스틱이 사용이 되고 있는데
Well, South Korea says it recycles more than 70% of its plastic waste. The group feels the entertainment industry owe it to the fans to do more. They plan to highlight this problem as the country prepares to host talks next week for a global plastic waste agreement.
If K-pop fans worldwide unite on this issue, they can really join forces and make a change when it comes to tackling the climate crisis and also tackling the plastic issue within K-pop specifically and making a change for young people worldwide, for young K-pop fans worldwide, and also for the planet as a whole.
Now turning our focus to the Suzhou Industrial Park in China. It started life 30 years ago as a joint project between Singapore and China. While Singapore now only has a minority stake in the park, it still retains much of Singapore's DNA, one that's helping it stand out in a crowded field. CNA's Tan Yu-guan explains.
In 1994, when Singapore Senior Minister Lee Kuan Yew signed the agreement for the joint venture to build Suzhou Industrial Park, Singapore had a majority 65% stake. But 5 years later, reduced its stake to 35%, transferring the management to Suzhou Municipal Government. Despite its reduced stake and the decades that passed, it's not hard to notice the seeds of Singapore's DNA planted within the park. There's the dense foliage echoing Singapore's garden city, the presence of Singapore organizations, and
the Suzhou Centre is also built and owned by Singapore property giant CapitaLand.
The skyscraper is now Suzhou's signature landmark, and the mall attached to it is the largest shopping centre in CapitaLand's global portfolio, big enough for 40 football fields. And therein lies one of the key things that Suzhou Industrial Park does for Singapore companies, the room to grow. Jeffrey Tiong's billion-dollar company has a huge operation in Suzhou today, but it started small in the National University of Singapore, or NUS.
After I graduated in 2007, NUS gave us the grant and gave us the space. That was our first office.
Why did you decide to set up shop in Suzhou Industrial Park?
Back then we compared the cost. I think the development cost in China is much cheaper than in Singapore. And more than 40% of our customers come from China market as well. To do well in a market, you have to be closer to the market, closer to the customer, then you can iterate and innovate better for them.
Suzhou Industrial Park acts as a catalyst for growth for Chinese tech companies as well.
覆盖，用被子或衣服等盖住某个东西。
This lamp, which can read what you point at, uses language recognition technology from Suzhou company AI Speech. AI Speech began as a tiny startup in Cambridge, UK in 2007, moving to Suzhou the following year. Today it employs over 1,000 people in the park.
It has a pro-business policy and environment. For example, there's a one-stop business administration center. You can basically finish all the issues just in one place. That's very efficient and convenient. And also it has something we call city and industry integration planning. So basically you have a work-life sort of balanced area.
When returning to China in 2017, Xiao Feng and his wife Tong Tong also fell in love with the living environment here. The pair are scientists.
我就考察了南京啊、深圳啊、苏州的工业园区，对于我们的 startup 公司的一个资助的这个力度也好，以及从生活环境也好，其实生活是可以慢下来的。然后在周末的时候也是可以带着小孩去想看看画展啊。
Suzhou Industrial Park is a lovely place, so organized. Thanks to the pioneers of the SIP that has really built this landscape and the entire infrastructure this well.
The Suzhou Industrial Park has gone beyond its industrial roots to become a much sought-after place to settle for the brightest minds to achieve their dreams. And that is perhaps the Suzhou Industrial Park's recipe for success and its greatest achievement as it turns 30 years old.
For 8 consecutive years now, the park has been ranked as the top economic and technology zone in China. Tan Yuguan, CNA, Suzhou, China.
And those were just snippets from our special feature on CNA Correspondent to mark the park's 30th anniversary. You can watch the full documentary on CNA Insider on YouTube or CNA.Asia. Now, the Singapore Pavilion at this year's UN Climate Change Conference in Azerbaijan saw more than 9,000 visitors over 10 days. Foreign dignitaries, businesses and youths formed the number, which is also 50% more than visitor figures last year. The pavilion brought together over 100 partners to host over 40 programs. It saw several key announcements, such as the central bank's 500 million Singapore dollar pledge to support Asia's transition to net zero. The world's first advanced degree in sustainable healthcare was also launched. Sustainability and Environment Minister Grace Fu told organizers the pavilion may be closing, but this is not the end.
I'm very, very proud of the impact that you have made on the discussions that we have across a wide array of issues on climate. And this is really how Singapore can contribute to climate action in a very real and tangible way, showing use cases, showing examples of how technologies, policies, and capital can be put together to make things happen.
And coming up on East Asia tonight, the demographic of contemporary art collectors is experiencing a shift in South Korea. We'll tell you why. Contemporary art collecting in South Korea is no longer just for the rich. Those from the MZ demographic, that is millennials and Gen Z, now make up the majority of new buyers. So what's drawing these younger collectors? CNE's Money Mind explores this phenomenon.
It's really grotesque.
It may look grotesque, but the works of Noh Jae-myung's collection are worth a pretty penny. Some have even increased in value by 20 times.
I always think that ugly doesn't mean it's bad and pretty doesn't guarantee the work is good.
For the South Korean, good art should spark strong feelings, be they positive or negative.
The first time I hated it, and later I liked it. And it's a work from a series showing a human becoming a rabbit.
The 33-year-old has spent more than half his life collecting artworks and now owns around 700 pieces.
For the series,
Young collectors like him are driving an unprecedented boom in the South Korean art market. In 2022, art sales exceeded 1 trillion won, or over $730 million for the first time.
Korea has a big potential to become the next art hub in Asia. There are lots of exhibitions going on.
Amid a collecting wave, as many as 100 art exhibitions were held in South Korea so far this year, including the internationally renowned Frieze. The lineup included Noh Jae-myung's Art Fair, the first hosted by a collector from the MZ demographic of millennials and Gen Z.
My intention was to mix up all the small, big, old, and young galleries all together. So I thought, there should be some weird platform where people can try something different from other art fairs. When they see something weird the first time, then people don't like it. But after seeing several times, then people start thinking it's unique. So to me, weird equals unique.
한국의 젊은 작가인 문주혜라고 하는 작가의 작품이고요. 지금 자세히 보시면은 좀 종이의 흔적이 잘 묻어나 있는데 그 한국의 전통 종이인 한지 위에다가 수채로 작업을 한 작업이에요.
Another MZ collector is Lee Ga-hyun. She's particularly interested in women artists and the stories they portray on canvas. She began collecting in 2018 and now has a collection of over 120 artworks. The experience inspired her and her husband to address what they saw as a glaring gap in the local market.
We wanted to provide a solution with collectors around the world that can easily give them an accessibility to a price database of the artworks, because when it comes to collecting art, it is very important to see and visit exhibitions. I wanted to bring that online.
This disruptive approach to not only bring artworks online, but also to provide a database that can offer transparency in price, they believed, was necessary to cater to the digitally savvy MZ collectors. 3D gallery tours and audio stories can take visitors on virtual art walks around the world on their platform called Easel. It was founded in 2015, but the digital initiative took off in earnest during the pandemic. Today, Easel has more than 60,000 works on its platform, 70% international and 30% Korean.
Now we are connecting around 200,000 collectors to more than 500 galleries around the world. And then the number of artworks that we are connecting between galleries and collectors about a year is over 20,000.
Today in South Korea, art is no longer just for the rich and the old. MZ collectors are emerging as a critical force, accounting for 60% of first-time buyers in 2021, according to Kiev, the country's biggest art fair. Art pieces priced below 60 million won, or around $45,000, are tax-free. And experts say that makes the sector increasingly attractive to MZ investors to get into art, either with their earnings from crypto, entrepreneurial activity, or family money.
And you can catch the complete Money Minds segment, why South Korea's Gen Zs and millennials are buying weird contemporary art on YouTube, MeWatch, and our website, cne.asia. Now we turn to American baseball, where Japanese-born Shohei Ohtani of the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers has been named the National League's most valuable player. The 30-year-old's win was unanimous. Ohtani earned all 30 first-place votes from the Baseball Writers Association of America, beating competitors Francisco Lindor from New York Mets and Ketel Marte from Arizona Diamondbacks. This is the third time Ohtani is awarded Most Valuable Player, an award he also received with the American League last year and in 2021. Following this, he has set his sights on securing yet another in the coming year. In Japan, fans are ecstatic.
私今年アメリカ行って35号ツーランホームラン生で見てたんですよ。なので記録ずくめの年の大谷選手の MVP が取る MVP のうちの今年54本ホームランシーズン打ってるんですけど、そのうちの1本生で見れたんで MVP 受賞って聞いてすごく嬉しかったです。
大谷さんのことを参考にしていくような選手が増えるのではないかなと、その一つのこといろんなことがやっぱり打されてくるので、そういったいろいろな技能を持った選手が増えていくんじゃないのかな、活躍するんじゃないのかなと思います。
In September, Ohtani became the first player in history with 50 or more home runs and 50 or more stolen bases in the same season. His historic 50th home run ball later sold for a record $4.39 million at a U.S. auction. And that's East Asia Tonight this Friday. Don't forget headlines anytime at cne.asia. Plus, we are on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.